question is, what am I thinking right now?
What are you thinking right now?
Well, that's the question.
Or what am I thinking right now?
What am I thinking right now?
Okay, what are you thinking right now? You're thinking about this podcast going well. You're thinking about the next podcast you have to do. And you're thinking about, I don't know, the new Architects album.
I have thought about that. Yeah. No, you're not far off. I was thinking about how I should have made my dinner earlier because I'm now going to have to rush through it between this podcast and the next one because I was making it and I was like just getting stuff ready. I was like, you know, when you just suddenly like, yeah, I got plenty of time. And then you sit down and you look at the clock and you're like, what? How are we here? And then I was just like, right, okay. So I will be having my salami diavolo pizza after this.
Nice.
If that's, you know. So yeah, I mean, you're pretty close. What are you thinking right now?
I'm thinking about all the snow that I'm surrounded by and how I want it to go away.
Oh, really?
And I'm thinking about next week because it's going to be a busy week as we transition into the beginning of the next month, which is usually a very stressful time period for me because we do things in blocks of months. So as soon as we transition to that new month, it's going to be a lot of work for me. But yeah, and taxes.
Oh, exciting. Yeah. Oh, yeah. To be fair, I've got that all to worry about as well. So with because I mean, just even through just the briefest search through kind of what you do, like looking at how many things you've kind of embarked on over, you know, your career and then still kind of continue to do. How do you think about balancing? You know, you're talking about being stressed about all this stuff coming up. How do you kind of keep a balance in your life with all these kind of things going on that you've got? Is it something that you feel like you have achieved, or are you juggling a lot? Like where do you sit with that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely juggling a lot. I've gotten more disciplined in the last few years. You know, before that, I would be the kind of person that would, you know, I might be on vacation, sitting on a beach, and I'll think to myself like, oh, what if I did this? And I'll come up with a really good idea. And then like, as soon as I get home from vacation, I'll like start an LLC and like do all the things and like build a big business. And then it's kind of like, oh crap, I have like too many things to do now. So I've become a lot more disciplined in the sense that like when I get a really good idea, I go, maybe not, unless, you know, it's going to weasel its way into my life. I give things more time than I used to. And I think that's just the responsible thing to do because I am so responsible for so many other things that are really important, not just for me now, but for lots of other people. So yeah, I've taken a step back on starting new things, and I've worked a lot harder on scaling things that I already have going on for me and for others. The balance is natural to some degree because I don't play video games and I don't watch TV. Actually, I live in Michigan right now, and I've been here since 2011. And since that time until this year, I haven't had a television. So that's like a decade without TV. So really my work is my life and my life is my work, if that makes sense. There's really no separation. So pretty much my day is filled with jumping around from business to business, tackling different problems. And I actually quite enjoy that, you know, and being the co-founder of a lot of these endeavors, I can step back pretty much whenever I want, only at the sacrifice of what would happen if I wasn't there. But other than that, I like what I do, so it doesn't really, the balance is just kind of part of it.
Yeah, I like how you sort of talking about starting an LLC, like sort of a drunken decision one night, like just wake up like, oh no, I've done it again. Like it sounds like, yeah.
I mean, it used to be like that.
Yeah.
Like I was on vacation with one of my friends and we were like, you know, he was in a band that toured the world and he was like talking about how all these bands like don't know the proper way to do music business. And I was like, dude, you could easily teach this and I could build the courses and we could make the website and like And like, we just got this crazy idea on our vacation. We came back and we built a company called Band Academy. And like, we did a pretty good job of keeping up with it for like the first couple of years, but it's been really hard to tackle it now that he's gone on to do a lot of really big things, and so have I. But that's the kind of like thing is I'll just be like hanging out with my friends. We'll just be getting a drink and they'll be like, what if we made this like boating app that did this thing? And we were like, yeah, let's start it tomorrow. We way too ambitious. Now I'm more like, okay, let's put a business plan together and see if it like sticks for the next 6 months to a year. And if we still want to do it after that, then maybe it's something worth exploring.
I think a lot of people nowadays are a bit disillusioned and a bit lost, because I think a lot of people, and myself included to an extent, are afraid to just like try things, especially at a young age. Like I'm 25, so like I feel like at every age point you feel like you're getting old. I feel like that's just a thing, but I feel like there's this real pressure as someone my age to be like getting my shit together, basically. And with like when I started doing this podcast, for example, I was kind of umming and ahhing. Like, I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to start it. And I think a lot of people, I'm still including myself in this category, are afraid just to try something. Like, what's the worst that can happen, kind of thing. And I think that spirit is perhaps sort of dwindling a bit, especially with like the cost of living and all this stuff that's going on. I just got my energy bill yesterday, and I'm not happy with that. So like I can see why people are afraid to do stuff. But when it comes to sort of like dipping your feet into all these different endeavors over the years, has that ever been to a detriment? Has that ever caused you difficulty in that you've been trying all these different things and actually maybe you should have not settled, but you know what I mean, like consolidated and kind of focused on something a bit earlier, perhaps?
Yeah. It's very easy to be in a scenario where, let's say you've found some success, everything seems to be going well, you're having your record years, your record quarters, whatever. When you're in those moments, it's kind of easy to be like, okay, what next? And sometimes you get the idea that, well, since we sell software over here and we sell education right here, let's like now do this third thing that kind of goes with those two other things. It's like, it's kind of a natural progression. And I've definitely been in a situation where I've added too many things that I had to eventually shut down. A good example was a program that I made called JST VIP. I couldn't keep up with it and I had to shut it down, and I ended up just turning it into a free resource. But it used to be a paid program. And that's a perfect example where I think I really should have just focused on being a software company and not trying to like add this membership program to, it was designed to help people get better at mixing and get better at producing. It's like, well, the tools that we make people get better at mixing and producing. So why don't we just focus harder on the tools? And so now I have that clarity of mind, and I really am, I get ideas weekly. People will even come to me with business ideas, and I'm just like, if it ain't helping me make plugins better and faster, I don't know if I really should get involved, because I really want to focus on like the main thing that I'm doing right now, which is the education aspect of, URM Academy and the plugins that we make at JST and Drumforge. Those are my babies, and those are the things that I need to take care of and see those mature all the way through. But you could have asked me about that like a couple of years ago, and I would just be adding random things to my plate. So I think when you're younger, it's easy to also chase ideas. We call it shiny object syndrome, and that seems to be happening almost every week now that we have pretty much deep integration into the internet and the global conversation across all different industries. So it's very easy to be like, flavor of the week. Okay, AI is the biggest thing right now. Let's start an AI company, right? Like, let's do NFTs. Let's do like let's do a crypto course. Like that's just kind of people your age are jumping from thing to thing. I think, this happened later for me, later in my life, but it was a few years ago now. I had this moment where I was like, what the hell what is my purpose here? Like, what am I actually supposed to be doing? And what kind of value do I bring to the world at large? And I was able to kind of have this epiphany and summarize it into a single sentence, which is, I help people make great music. And I do that with my engineering skills. I do it with my production skills. I do it with my software. I do it with my education. It really gave me like that one single sentence gave me the clarity and the vision of what I need to focus on going forward and what I should put my effort and energy into. And so I think about every business opportunity through that lens. If somebody comes to me with an idea, I'm like, does that help me help people make great music? If the answer is no, I'm likely going to put that on a back burner or maybe not even approach it at all. Because I'm lucky, I think. I think I have such an amazing opportunity in front of me with all the synergistic businesses that we have working together and the great, track record, I guess, that I've been able to achieve with my records. It's like, why put that to waste? Like, put it to good use and do what I'm good at, which is basically help other people make great albums, make great, use my plugins to make their own music sound great. Like, that's really what I'm going to focus on. And I think when you're younger, if you can figure out what that mission statement is for yourself and stick to it, like really commit to it, I think that's the secret sauce to really going far.
I think that finding that mission statement is, again, that's another tricky thing, isn't it? That like, it's interesting you talk about how that kind of lens, and like, I think lens for me sounds like the right word, that kind of, when you change it out and put that lens on things, it can kind of, distorts things in a positive way, and you suddenly see things differently. And I know for a fact when I'm sort of struggling to find motivation for stuff, it's not often like out of a pure sense of not wanting to do it. It's out of a like, well, why am I doing this? Like, what? Not in a hopeless way necessarily, but just in like a, you can see all the guitars there. I play a lot of guitar, and if I'm not feeling motivated one day, it will often root back to me thinking like, what's the kind of driving like direction here? When you've got all the, particularly when you've got such a defined like mission statement like that, I know for a fact, and I suspect you might be a bit like me in this sense. So I feel very guilty if I give myself time away from that, and sometimes almost to the point where I can do like very little that day, like in terms of productive work. But then, ironically, after that, if I've not been that productive, I won't let myself relax either, because I'm thinking about. And it becomes this cycle sometimes, And it sounds like you're, from what I can tell, very productive. But do you ever have those moments where you struggle to switch off and just enjoy the moment and that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty. It's strange to me because I often feel like I'm somewhat of a robot or a computer in terms of how I process things. It's almost like everything is just a mathematical like equation. However, I do get pretty emotional about like let's say there's something that's just not going right in the organization. There's a bad actor in the employees, or there's something like that. That can really bother me. It makes me feel like I'm not on course. It'll make me feel like I'm being held back. It's like I want to solve it as quickly as possible. And it's hard to really like shut that off, especially as a business owner. And a lot of my friends are people who don't, I obviously have friends that own businesses, and I have some businesses with some of my friends, but a lot of my friends don't own businesses. So it's really interesting because I don't get to really talk about that to a lot of people. But when you own a business, like, it never gets turned off. it's front and center of your life pretty much all the time, unless you specifically draw those boundaries. And it can get to you, it can definitely affect a lot of different things in your life. It can affect your personal relationships, your home life, your home work, or your life work balance, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I often find myself being affected a little bit, like emotionally, with issues like that. Now, when the business is doing really well, and there's less things to worry about, and you have less obstacles or problems to be solving, then it's just kind of like, sweet, I guess I get to watch a movie tonight or something, and kind of get like a little bit of a reward. But yeah, I think also it's just my nature, like, because a lot of the things that I am a part of and that I've created are all surrounded by me and my work and my life's work and the albums I've produced. So it's very easy for me to take a lot of things personally too, which is tough, because I kind of envy some of those people who have a business where it's this separate brand and has nothing to do with a specific person. It's like, okay, those people get to like kind of check out when they want to, versus me, where it's like I have to stand behind every single thing we say, every single post that we make, every single product that we put out. It's all me. So that can be pretty stressful.
That it sounds like you really place in terms of this whole idea of like locus of control, how much you're in control of your actions and the things happening around you. Like it sounds like you've really placed that within yourself, which is something I try to do more of, but I think again, I'm not trying to put a negative spin on all of these things. I'm more just trying to sort of delve into how you think about it. But that idea of being in control of these situations, do you ever struggle when things happen where it is out of your control, where you can't actually intervene in a way that you want? Are you okay at accepting that? Or especially, I'm guessing when you're running multiple kind of enterprises, that can become something that's quite difficult to handle if you're not, like you said, about like a bad actor in the company or something like that. You can control a certain amount of that, but there's a certain amount you can't control within that situation. How do you deal with those kind of scenarios?
Well, I have always been somewhat of a control freak just by nature of being a producer. I mean, that's kind of what you do. When you're a producer, you control almost every aspect of the record making process. So that naturally carries over to becoming a business owner. You kind of control like a lot of different aspects of the business. But what I had to learn is that in order to build a company or an organization that can scale and grow beyond your own capability, you need to empower your team members. You need to build leadership structures and allow those people to make mistakes, even when you can see it from a mile away. I can see, this person is definitely going to make this mistake, but I have to let them do it, because if they don't, they're not going to learn. And I can tell them all day long what not to do. But that doesn't teach you in the same way. Now, of course, that's not to say that I will purposely let a person fail. But I understand that if I bring somebody in and they do make those mistakes, and I knew that those mistakes were possible, I use it as a learning opportunity. And I think that helps build stronger employees and build stronger character among the people who are working for your organization. So that's something I did have to learn. Did not come naturally to me at all. In fact, I'm kind of not the greatest boss, and I'm learning that about myself, because as being a producer, pretty much most of my time is spent telling people what they do wrong and why it's bad. Versus like giving people compliments when they do a good job. So I have to like really, that's like a switch that I have to turn on. It doesn't come on naturally. I have to like press it on and be like, okay, let me do a round of like positive feedback for everybody, because everyone is doing like some things that they're doing have like good effect. So let me give those compliments out and then go back to being the negative Nancy that a producer is sometimes.
Yeah. The whole I found just through trying to forge a career in music, the amount of my like personal skills that have been challenged in some way, whether it be like through being in a band or being in the studio or through like doing this podcast, you know, because I've chatted to, this is number 70, 8, 9, one of them. So like I've chatted, and naturally I've chatted to some people I get on really well with, some that like I don't naturally click with. And so I've had to develop a lot of skills on that front. And how else do you feel like you've changed through production and through kind of creating these enterprises? How do you feel like your sort of personal skills, maybe even personality, has like kind of changed through that?
Well, in the early years, which is like in my 20s, I mean, I recorded over 100 albums in a decade time period. So it was about 10 albums a year. And I met people from all over the world. And so a lot of my social skills, because I'm naturally an introvert. You know, I used to sit on my computer when I was in high school. I'd come home from high school and I'd start programming like a website or something. That's what I did for fun. So I didn't really like hang out with people or anything. And then I had to like develop social skills because, you know, I'd have like 5 dudes in a metal band behind me, like just raging hard, like as we're making a record. So, you know, luckily I was able to stay away from drugs and alcohol for a long time. And I still don't do any of that stuff. I do drink alcohol now, but I'm much older. But throughout my 20s, I didn't do anything like that. And I actually didn't allow anyone else to do any of that kind of stuff in the studio. It was supposed to be a place of focus. But I learned a lot of social skills from that. And then I would say phase 2 is when I kind of pulled back a little bit from record making and got a little bit more involved in building these businesses and doing this kind of stuff. I developed more of a professional skill set, which is, you know, sometimes you go into big meetings with really important people and knowing what to say and what not to say and how to conduct those kinds of things. And that's kind of phase 2 of like the skills that I've learned, the communication skills mostly. And yeah, it's I'm naturally a self-learner, and I've just recently had to go through kind of a whole I don't even know what to call it, but like I basically have recently learned how to be a better boss, a better leader, a person who can hire and fire people without causing drama. Like that's a whole new skill set to me that I never really had to take on. But now that some of our companies are getting bigger, like it's a really important thing. You need to be able to recruit talent and find people that can help you. And you need to be able to also get rid of people who are pulling you down or holding you back. Unfortunately, but sometimes that happens. And so that's it comes to me a little unnatural. I have to kind of like learn about it and read about it. And I study from some people that I look up to. I have some role models for instance. And so for anyone else out there that's like wanting to learn like the networking skills or like the personable skills that it takes to be able to like get yourself out there and approach people in your industry. I say like, try to find a mentor. It's like it's like the quickest shortcut there is. We actually have a director of marketing at URM. His name is Finn McKenty. And, he's worked at really big things like Abercrombie and Fitch. He's worked at Creative Live, all these different places. And when I first met him, I had no idea that I'd ever be working with him in the capacity that we are now. But when I met him, I was like, oh, this guy really knows what he's talking about, and kind of became like a subconscious mentor of mine. And so his conduct rubbed off on me, his way of thinking about problem solving, about how you focus on the solution instead of focusing on the problem. These kinds of things kind of rubbed off on me and gave me like a way of dealing with those types of problems in business. And so for anyone out there, like, they say you're the sum of the people around you. So if you have a bunch of bad actors or lazy people that are your friends and they're in your friend circle, and that's like the people that you hang out with every day, you're going to be some fraction of that. And so I would say surround yourself with like people who are awesome and badass. And that's probably the quickest way to bettering yourself in that regard.
I can either take that as a compliment that you're here, or maybe that you're trying to help me by surrounding yourself with me. I can take that either way with the surrounding yourself with all right people. Yeah, it's funny actually. I literally wrote down, I've got like a brief few notes to sort of discuss, and something I talked about was like, or wrote down, was mentorship, and how looking through how you'd developed yourself, how a lot of it seems self-taught, more on the product. Well, it seems like with everything from what you're talking about, there's a lot of self-teaching in there, like you say. What do you think maybe you've perhaps gained, and then what do you think you maybe missed more on the production side, maybe with the kind of lack of perhaps a mentor, or were there mentors around that maybe that kind of did help you in that early stage?
Well, when I was learning how to make records, all my mentors were from afar. I never really had any active mentors that were really like communicating with me directly. It was more just like somebody else setting an example to follow. Like I would look up to people like Andy Sneap or Ross Robinson or Mutt Lange, and you can see what those guys are doing from afar. And you hear little whispers of like, oh, I heard Mutt Lange will sit there and record the same guitar riff for like a month until it sounds amazing. And it's like, okay, that's some kind of validation, right? That's like, I don't feel crazy for sitting here and making the guitar player play the same riff over and over and over for 4 hours. Like there's some kind of credibility to actually doing that. Or you hear like about, Ross Robinson does this with the vocalists in the studio to get like the best performance out of them. And it's like, oh, okay, so I'm not so crazy for thinking that, every once in a while we're going to throw some stuff because we're pissed off. It kind of helps people get out some of their aggression, and maybe it will create a better vocal performance, which, I have done before. So from afar, I was getting a lot of mentorship from different people, whether they knew it or not. And then I also was being a mentor to people. And I feel like this is kind of like this is the secret sauce that a lot of people don't talk about, is that when you teach somebody, you actually learn more about it. And so I had people like Nick Sampson, for example, guitar player, very talented, creative artist, but was learning a little bit more about record making. And I was pulling him in and saying like, help me with these guitars. And by teaching him my methods for recording guitars, it was almost like I was learning a little bit more about myself and my own methods and my own techniques just by having to show it to somebody and having to figure out how to actually explain it to someone. And in return, I was getting help with the guitar tracking process. Like he was able to come in and help with some of the workload because it was a lot of work. And through that, like ended up mentoring him all the way through his entire, like the beginning of his careers, and set him off to be now a very credible music producer who works with some of the bands that I used to record, even like We Came as Romans, and now doing work with bands like Polyphia. So, and there's several others, Nick Scott, there's Nick Matskos, there's Tyler Smith. There's all these different people who I have mentored through my career and given those. Well, I didn't give them a career, but I gave them like a lot of foundation for them to like build a career on, and to also take the knowledge that and the experience that I've handed to them and twist it into their own thing and be able to go off on their own way and do things in their own way. I think that's great. Some people feel, I know some people who feel threatened by that kind of thing or whatever, but I just feel proud. It's like record production is an art form, in my opinion. And I think that there's no gatekeepers. Just everyone should be able to just get together and do whatever they want to do together. And I don't feel any let's say I work with a band and we do 5 albums together, and then they do the 6th album with somebody else, that doesn't hurt me at all. Like that's their choice. In fact, I'd be like, I think it might be time for you guys to try something new now. I kind of encourage it. And I think that's a healthy attitude. And I think I learned that as well through the process of mentoring other people.
Well, it ties in with your, you're saying about your sort of mission statement being helping people make great music. And I guess if you're teaching other people or helping them to help other people make great music, you're not deviating at all from that statement in that way.
It's part of it. Yeah, it's absolutely part of it.
Yeah. When you kind of sat there with bands where, if you're in that moment where, I think this is particularly relevant nowadays. I think a lot of people are afraid to have conversations like unpleasant or particularly awkward or difficult conversations with people in the moment, because no one likes confrontation, and I think some people are a little bit scared of it nowadays. And I guess this ties in with your businesses now as well, in terms of any difficult conversations you might have to have. But also going back to maybe studio, sort of working with bands in the studio as well, how do you kind of approach those difficult conversations? Do you ever find yourself sort of shying away from them? Or are you quite good at just going, no, this has to be said? And then, because I know it's always that thing of it's the immediate pain and awkwardness for a longer term, hopefully better solution is what these awkward conversations tend to be. But it's so easy to avoid them because you just think, oh, I'll delay it. And then things just inevitably get worse in the future. So how do you kind of, I suppose, broach those kind of topics?
So it all comes down to presentation at the end of the day. Same thing that we do when we're making albums. Person will show me a song. I can interpret it however I do, and then I can present that in many different ways. So I could take a song that is originally presented as a sad, maybe an acoustic track with like very like slow tempo, and the lyrics are kind of sad and all this stuff. It's like, well, we could speed it up. We can give it a rock edge. We can shift the key. We can do these different things. And now it's being presented as sort of an upbeat thing. And the message is probably, and still intact, but it's being presented in a different way. And so it's kind of like, if you do a bad vocal take, I could say, that's the worst thing I've ever heard. And it comes across as like, oh, that was sharp. Or I could say, that's not your best. And that's a completely different presentation of basically the same idea. So when it comes to difficult conversations or difficult messaging that has to be done, you find ways to do your presentation. You find ways to say it in a way that can be received in a good way. Even if it is a bad thing that needs to be said, it can be perceived as oh, thank you, you're looking out for me, and I'm glad that you said this to me, versus like, oh, that was nasty, or you're very angry, or you're mean, or whatever. So it kind of comes down to like having that skill to figure out how to say things in the right presentation for the right moment.
Yeah, it's an interesting one with because what I was going to tie that into as well was when it comes to like bands. Obviously, bands are notoriously kind of, there's arguments, and there's that person doesn't like that person, and then that one doesn't like that one for a whole other reason, and but they all work together somehow. And have you ever? I'm going to assume that you have found yourself in that position, perhaps of like mediating with bands, being that kind of middleman. How do you kind of? I suppose what have you learned about people? I guess from just observing some of these. I'm going to assume you've had bands in where you've had conversations, or you've had to observe quite difficult maybe conversations, and disagreements about something that they really are passionate about. So how do you kind of? Or what have you learned from watching those kind of interactions and being in the room with them?
Well, I can start off by saying I'm not perfect either. I mean, I've definitely handled some scenarios in the complete wrong way, and I've made some major mistakes, which is why I'm able to come on a podcast like this and give you the retrospective, hindsight's 2020 kind of thing. But the best advice or answer that I have for this is to just step back and remember that you're all on the same team. Like, we're all here to make the best record we've ever made, and we're here to do it together. So when you've got the bass player complaining about his bass in the record and it's not loud enough and blah, 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 or you have this person that says, oh, I hate when you write lyrics like that. Well, just remember that even though you're saying that, you're coming from a place of saying that, you're still on the same team and you're still trying to make the best record together. And that sort of kind of helps hone it in and think, okay, well, you know, you obviously don't like this lyric idea. I really do like it. We both want to make the best record possible. Let's see what we can do together. How can we compromise? Is there something else we can do? I think just that little flip of the switch can really help a lot of people.
I think it's so difficult when it's, you know, there are very few people in successful bands, I'd imagine, who aren't passionate about what their particular input in the music, you know. So to try and I definitely know that feeling of handing over control can be very difficult. You know, it's what we were talking about earlier, sort of you know, going back to your sort of business side of things, or you know, handing over that control. When I was watching an interview, I was watching one of your interviews about talking with, like, I think you said about being kind of nervous about working with labels because you'd worked with bands to a certain point, and then obviously then the labels start emailing you saying, you know, this band wants to come in or whatever. I don't quite know the process there, but when it comes to kind of the influence of labels and how they kind of integrate with bands and producers, what would be your advice maybe to bands that are just starting to work with some labels now regarding how they approach the studio? Because I know for a fact, and I've kind of to a small extent been there, where there's a label that says it'd be great if you did X, Y, and Z, and you're kind of maybe sat there thinking, I don't want to do that, you know. How do you kind of deal with that external influence, be it managers, labels, whatever, and how do you stop it kind of getting in the way of what you're really trying to do?
Well, the toughest part with labels can be when there's no alignment, which can happen. Sometimes you get a label who sees the artist as one thing and the artist sees themselves as another thing. And when you get into those scenarios, that misalignment really can mess things up. Because technically, as a producer, you are being hired by the artist and you're being paid by the label. And the label really is more or less a business component in the activity of the band, and they're not so much a creative component. Now, where that starts to get fucked up is when you have an A&R at a label who has some sort of agenda, and they, like I said, they see the artist as one thing, the artist sees themselves as another thing. And then you get this weird kind of triangular thing going on where the label tells you to do something, and then you tell the band that they want to do this, and the band tells you, no, we don't want to do that. Then the band tells the A&R person, well, we don't want to do that. And the A&R person tells the band that they want to do this. And it just becomes this like ping pong thing. Then there's other scenarios, like when I worked with Rise Records for a number of years, where it was as simple as send the check, cash it, band arrives, make the album, send the album, done. That simple. Not a single person intermingling in the process. No one telling me make the song longer or shorter, repeat this chorus, don't do that song, do this song, sing about this, blah, blah, blah. Nobody doing any of that. Just the easiest cut and dry relationship there could possibly be in the record business. And a lot of my best records came from that. Conversely, you get scenarios where band comes in, has one idea, label has a completely other idea, and you're there in the middle, like, what am I supposed to do? And most of the time I would just remember, hey, I'm being hired by the band. Doesn't really matter what the label wants, because at the end of the day, the band hired me. The contract is between me and the band. yes, the money is coming from the label, but that is the artist's advance. So it is their money. And at the end of the day, the label can't control every aspect of what an artist does. So yeah, sometimes you stand your ground, and other times you get a manager yelling at you on the phone and you figure it out. But I've always liked those situations where everyone's aligned. You know, you got a label that understands who they sign. They understand that that person is the artist and that person should be making the calls on the art and the creative. And the label's just there to fund the whole thing and make it work financially. Those are the beautiful scenarios that often work really well.
Are there any kind of God, I keep getting these questions in my head, and I feel like I'm spinning everything so like negatively. So I'm like, what went wrong with this? I feel like but I feel like that's where the interesting stuff is. Maybe, yeah. I'm not just going to ask you about all the things that went brilliantly well, because they're probably on your website, you know, or whatever. So it's like, what I was going to ask was, have you? I kind of had two questions. One was, have you ever had a moment where you have just had to put your foot down and say, like, no, in a difficult scenario like that, to a label or even to a band? And I've forgotten what the other one was, have you ever had a job that you've taken that in retrospect, maybe a bigger job, that you think that in retrospect you think, that I probably shouldn't have taken that job? And obviously you don't have to name anyone, it's just,
That's a good question. I mean, I've definitely been in scenarios where things didn't go right. I mean, one in particular, and I can talk about it because it's kind of out there, is, I produced an Asking Alexandria record that I wanted to see to the end. And unfortunately, due to time constraints of my schedule, I was unable to mix the record at the time when they wanted it to be mixed. I totally would have mixed it. In fact, I had kind of made the entire record in the way that I would make a record, so that, because I knew that I was going to mix it. So there were some compromises made because I knew that I was handling it in a certain way. So handing it off to someone was actually not the easiest thing to do. And it did cause some friction. And unfortunately, I did not get to mix that album, and I wish I would have, but it's okay. They had to go to somebody else, and it is what it is. But that's an example of like biting off more than you can chew. I had two bands in the studio at the same time. I was mixing a record, and there was just no way I could mix two records and have two bands. It was just chaos. So that, there's no way at that point we couldn't do 4 projects at the same time. The cool thing is that, like, it seems like a lot of that stuff has been really lax now. Like, I don't ever find myself in those scenarios anymore where it's like, oh, we got to get the record done before spring, or like this whole thing's going to be like screwed. It's like people are more like, as long as we have a single out by summer, like we'll be all right. It's like, all right, cool. It's a lot easier. And what was the? I think I answered one of those questions.
Yeah.
What was the other
one? The other one was, have you ever had to put your foot down and say no in quite a difficult scenario?
Yeah, I mean that was like me saying, like, look, guys, I know that we've worked together and this is like our 5th album, but like, I cannot mix it right now. That's like me putting my foot down. Other times too is like, I've had, let's see, what's another scenario? Like that, I did a record once where I absolutely despised the vocals. I was just like, these vocals are awful. And so I had to just keep so we were in the studio with the band without the vocalist. We were making the songs, and then I would send the song to him, and I'd be like, record a demo and send it back to me, because he wasn't there yet. I don't remember why, but it doesn't matter. We were all okay with it. He just wasn't there. So he'd do the demo and send it back, and I'd be like, this is all wrong. Like, start over. And then he'd be like, what do you mean? And I'd be like, literally start over. Forget everything you just sent me, because I'm not going to do that. Just make something else. And a couple of rounds of that kind of got the picture that like it just wasn't going to work. And the manager had to step in and be like, okay, well, we'll do vocals over here and you guys do the music over there. And we'll just kind of like we'll compromise and we'll just, whatever comes from here and here, we'll just like kind of do this. And I was like, all right, I guess. It wasn't my favorite record and it wasn't the best scenario, but I put my foot down and was like, these vocals, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing the vocals like this. So it was what it was.
Yeah, I guess again ties in with your mission statement, doesn't it? Of like sometimes the sort of bitter pill to swallow, but if it's
a tough love, sometimes some people need to hear that. It's like, this is not, we felt like, okay, this record's out of 10 right now. This record, like the musically, it's 10 out of 10. Your vocals are like a 5 out of 10. You need to figure this out, So yeah, but it was just really, it was tough love. It was like, at the end of the day, I'm just telling you what needs to be said, because if not, then you're just going to make the worst record you've ever made, which is what I'm sure you don't want that to happen,
Without sort of revealing too much, was it more to do with the writing or was it more to do with the technique and the capability?
I think it was actually a combination of both, in my opinion.
Oh, that's the worst.
Yeah, which kind of was why it was like out of 5 out of 10. If it was like, okay, well, technique's great, but like writing is just not great. Well, maybe it'd be like a 7 or an 8 out of 10. But yeah, it was like both. It was just kind of like, let me vomit vocals on top of this. And I was like, no, you're not going to do that.
Yeah. I know definitely when I first went to the studio how much I personally learned. I know the rest of the guys in the band at the time learned just from hearing things like with an actual producer sitting there going, have you thought about this? And we go, no. And they'll be like, have you, so, and then these harmonies and these layers, like, no. And then, and I think the amount that as a new band that we kind of picked up on, I would never change, because we were in this, we spent way more time in the studio than a band should do for like a first single, but then again, I kind of half take that back. So I'm like, we learned so much about being there, that I really wouldn't change that experience, because yeah, in retrospect, it'd be great to know all these studio things, but and not just studio, but like compositional ideas. He would just say, that's a bit samey, or what's this bit doing here in the song in the bridge? We had a bridge that just didn't really make sense. And you try and explain it and you find yourself digging yourself into a hole, and he sat there with a bit of a sort of a look on his face of confusion, and you're like, that you're just talking to a brick wall and that he's right. And that, what do you think, like, I guess some advice for like young artists, maybe people who are just getting into the studio, more on the compositional side of things? What are some of the things you've noticed? Because I know there's I guess it's not obvious to everyone, but the more obvious things would be like practice to metronome, know your parts, all of that kind of stuff, and don't be a dick, basically. But maybe more on the songwriting and the composition, what do you think maybe bands miss when they get in the studio for the first time? Because I know we've gone in with like loads of great riffs, but we haven't really had a song before, for example.
Yeah, I have a couple of things that I'll just rattle off. The first thing I would say is, and this is like my new favorite thing, because like I have complete confidence when I ask this question. I used to be like almost too anxious or maybe even too nervous to ask this question, but now like that I'm older, I find myself thinking like, even my day-to-day life, I'm like, what the hell is the point? Like, why you need to have a why. Everything needs to have a why. So my favorite thing to ask right now is, why are you making this song? And people are usually like, oh shit, that's a crazy question. And like, they've never been asked that before. And I expect a good answer. If you don't have a good answer, then I'm like, this is a joke. Like, this is, where's the passion? What's going on behind the song? What's the purpose? So I love that question. I think it really puts into perspective, why are you recording this to make this a piece of history forever? Because that's what music is. When you make that music and you upload that to Spotify or whatever, like, it's out there. Like, you can't undo that. The song is heard and remembered, and on and on and on. So I ask people, why are you making this song? The second thing is purpose, which kind of ties into number one. But, I want everyone to create with purpose. You shouldn't be at least at this stage in my career. I'm not here to make records just because it's fun or because like, you think that this chord sounds cool and that's cool. Like you can have moments like that, but there has to be what is the purpose? Like there has to be purpose behind the creation. Like the art is an expression for a reason. Not just to, I don't want to, okay, let's make 10 songs and so we can go on tour and party every night and all, I don't want that. I want there to be some purpose behind the art. And the third one, which is really not anywhere close in terms of weight equally for the first and second one, but why is it that everyone thinks they need a double or even a triple intro? I cannot tell you how many times I hear that. It's like we're a minute 30 into the song and you haven't even sung the first note of the chorus. Like, what is going on, man? Like, so I'm King Chop. I go in the song and I chop my way up to the chorus to try to get that thing within the first 40 to 50 seconds. Yeah, just get rid of the double and triple intro. Nobody needs that much conditioning to get into your song. So
yeah, I do. I always kind of I remember when we my old band, we just put an EP together, and I remember almost feeling a little bit like not self-conscious in the word, but like a bit, I was questioning because a couple of the songs were like three and a bit minutes, and obviously I listen to quite a lot of like prog metal and just metal in general. You quite often get these 5, 6, sometimes even 7 and 8 minute songs, and I was always like, have we done enough? It's only a 3.5 minute song. But then you look at like pop music and most of that's 3.5 minutes, and I was like, hang on, well, we hit the intro and that was good, and then we were straight in the verse chorus. Quite often it would have the standard A B, was it C? I can't remember the structure. Yeah, your Beatles song, your standard kind of not Beatles song, what am I thinking? You know what I mean? Your verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, done. And I always got a bit stuck. I was like, did we need anything else? But actually we didn't. It was all kind of there. But yeah, so there's one more little question I wanted to ask you, then I'll let you crack on. You mentioned briefly about AI and stuff, and I know that's kind of all the topic of conversation everywhere now. And I saw a video today where a guy said something along the lines of, he reckons that it won't be too far in the future, although possibly quite some way, where he can say to Alexa or whatever the name is for the next one, I want to hear a song that sounds like, I don't know, Metallica and AC/DC and also a bit of Lizzo, I don't know, and then magically that will happen. Can you see these kind of sci-fi level music kind of developments at some point in like within the average person's lifetime?
Yeah. It's kind of already happening. I'm gonna forget the name of it now. I'm trying to think of what it is.
This chat thing you're going to talk about,
but yeah, there's like, what is it? Gigabots, something like that. Yeah, where they have like the 24/7 grindcore streaming channel that's just completely. Yeah. It's like trained on like Arcspire and some other bands like that, and it's like it just keeps playing like a never-ending song of grindcore. And they have other things. They have like the never-ending bass solo.
That sounds like the worst thing ever.
These things are cool. They're not practical yet. They're not fully developed yet, but it's really like it's just going to happen very fast, guys. Like I can't tell you how crazy things are about to get. Like, number one, we've already got album artwork that's being created entirely by AI that people are using on their actual album releases. I've seen that a couple times. You've got Chat GPT that can write lyrics. You've got all these different Google innovations and experiments that can actually write music in different ways. One is it can mimic waveform synthesis and create new waveform synthesis. Another one is it can go and actually do the composition of the MIDI performance, and then you can take that MIDI performance and put it through a virtual instrument and have it sound like it was played. And you're going to have some kind of commingling of all these different technologies together, and probably somebody will create like an AI band and, and figure out how to like even take over TikTok algorithms and become one of the biggest monthly listener bands on Spotify. And, we're going to see all that stuff's going to happen. But, you have to kind of hope that it ends up being almost like the, at least in my opinion, the crash of the NFTs. Like last year and the year before that, everybody's talking about NFTs. And now it's like, I haven't seen anybody talk about them. So it's kind of like, will we see AI just rise to this pinnacle where then we go, you know what? As humans, we actually respect the fact that somebody can stand up on that stage and sing that song note for note and sound incredibly close to the performance that's on the recording. And that's impressive. And that's why I'm entertained. And that's a place that we need to get back to. And I think that maybe we have to go through some of these phases of like letting the AI come in and get intertwined into some of this to then realize that, oh, actually, we want to see real art. We want to see human performance. We want to see, things that are written from the soul or from the heart, that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, I think we're in it, we're at the initial stage. And it's tough, man, because you don't really know. Like I use Chat GPT on a daily basis in my business. And so I can't imagine that there's not artists out there not using it to like help them finish the song that they're on the last line. What should it say? So you just tell GPT, like, here's all my lyrics so far, and I need to figure out this one line. It's like, here's 10 suggestions. And you're like, oh, sweet. And then,
What are you using it for out of interest?
We use it to help us write like, different like professional letters.
Whoa. That's crazy.
Things like it helps with customer support response. Different things that just require long thought out writing that, a robot can do pretty quick.
That's ridiculous. I can't get my head I can get my head around it, but like that's so crazy to think about that you can just I know we're already in some, you get these primitive things where, you go on, you call someone up maybe and there's like dial this for this, but it feels like that whole thing is just becoming like, I don't think it's going to be long before you're chatting. You don't even know if it's a person on the phone,
Yeah. I mean, I would say a lot of the biggest corporations have been doing it for a while. When you chat to like Delta Airlines, that's the very first thing that happens is you're talking to a robot until it realizes either it can solve your problem with automation or it's like, oh, you do need to speak to a representative. Let me go find someone for you. But that first conversation is AI, baby, the whole thing. So yeah, it's here, man. It's here to stay. So buckle up.
I always try and whenever I'm on those calls, I always try and think of the most awkward selection of things I can do just so they just give me a human being. I'm like, I'll have the most obscure problem that actually I just want a refund or something, but I'm just like, I need to give them something awkward, so AI goes, "Oh, can't do that," and then they'll just throw me into like customer service or whatever. Yeah, man. I mean, we covered loads of stuff, and I think it was hopefully for anyone listening a good insight into you as a person, and I can't talk about AI for too long, otherwise I won't sleep. So, I think that's a good place to call it. So I need a question for the next guest. And also an artist you'd like to sort of present to the world.
Well, I'm sure some of you know this artist, but I think that they're one of the most they have the most heart, and they're actually incredible to listen to. Amazing songwriter. The artist is Shaylee. The band is Dayshell. And I'm actually working with them on an album, so it is a little bit of a plug for me. But it's who I would recommend because I'm a huge fan. So yeah, check out Dayshell. It's spelled exactly how you would think, all one word. And Shaylee is a good friend of mine who's the mastermind behind it. And he used to be in of Mice and Men way back in the day. The very first record that we did, he was in the band. He did all the singing vocals on that album. And yeah, now he's doing his own thing, and it's awesome.
Nice.
And let's see, question for the next guest.
Be about the
I think it would be
AI, or it can be about something inspirational, whatever you like.
Yeah, what do you think your mission statement is?
That's a really good one. Yeah. It's, well, I mean, I will find out. I'll find out in about half an hour-ish. Is the plan.
It might require a little context so that they understand what the answer should be.
I think. I know from our conversation what they will be. Yeah. I think hopefully I'll make sure they get it. Yeah. Cool. Awesome, man. Have you got anything you want to sort of plug to the world while we finish up?
No, man. Just check out my stuff. joeysturgistones.com or URM. It's urm.academy. It's kind of a weird website. There is no .com, just urm.academy. But yeah, check it out.
Amazing. Thank you very much, man.
Cool. Thanks.